So the communication between the user, we call it endpoint here. And let me just minimize this also. The user and the AD, that's all nice and good. Radius comes in here to implement more sophisticated policies. Okay, so the radius will be in between, and the user will submit the credentials to the radius. Radius, on behalf of the user, will take care of that leg of communication between itself and AD. AD will say, Mr. Radius, this user is a good man. Radius has some sort of policies here. Is going to say, okay, thank you very much. This good man, I will allow him a bandwidth of maximum 10 megabyte or 10 megabyte amount of traffic. And this user should be on the system for 3 hours only. Okay. So the radius has a lot of control. And along the time, so along the way, over a period of time, 10 hours later, or let's say 10 minutes later, this user has visited a bad website, has got infected. That information will be sent to the clear path. So infected after 10 minutes. They'll say this user is infected. Policy says disconnect. And they was going to say, okay, thank you, Mr. Good Man. Now you are no longer a good man. I'm going to disconnect you. And maybe that disconnection will lead the user to try to connect again, that's for sure. Is the user is oblivious, it doesn't see what's going on in the back end. User reconnect again, maybe redirect it to a web page where they need to do a scan on their machine, or they block them, or there's a message, visit IT department. Okay, so that's basically what the radius is doing, and that's why we need to have radius in between to implement sophisticated policies. So that is the basic principle of any radius. Okay, now, with that understanding, let's look at the relationship between the client or the endpoint and this guy, the radius server. So come here, let us say, we'll look at more microscopic view of the radius and the client. So typically the client say, we'll take a use case. Typically the client, let us say, simplify it, connect to an AP. That AP will advertise employee SSID. That's all good and nice. Remember the AP, of course, physically connected to a switch. Again, we don't care much about this now in this. Then we will have the clear path. So in between, then we have the AD. We know that story. But what is the relationship between these three components? We will call this one a supplicant, the one who supplicates for service. And we call this one an NAD device, network access device. We will call this guy authentication server. Okay. So this authentication server is the ultimate entity that will authenticate the user, and that's the radius. Okay. Now, for this to work, this guy implement whatever authentication method, which we will go into a little bit more details. The NAT device, it happened to be the access point in this example, will take that request on behalf of the client. At this stage, the client is waiting, and we will take this one as a radius form or format EAP. So the EAP here, and it will encapsulate it in a radius packet. The radius talks to ClearPass or the radius server will say, okay, I access accept you, access accept message, and then that access accept message, the control will be sent to the NAT device. NAT device will implement the control. Okay, so that's the basic principle of any radius communication, as simple as that. Now we need to go and get to details. Radius that can be from Microsoft MPS, can be ClearPass, can be anything, can be Cisco, okay, can be any third party for Scout. Each one of them, or each one of the vendors, they have certain ways to implement the policies. In radius, so if you look at any radius, in any radius, we will receive a request. So request comes from the user. The request on behalf of the user will be taken care of by the NAT device. Okay, so NAT device will send the request. In the radius itself, they have policies to authenticate. So the way every single radius works, we will have different policies. Let's call them policy 1. And let's say these are authentication policies. Again, remember, this is a high-level view of any radius. Policy 1, there will be policy 2. Let us say we have up to policy n. And they are ordered in the, when you configure them, we say policy 1, then policy 2, then policy 3, and so on. Request comes, they will be trying policy 1. If there's no match, they say, thank you very much. Go to policy 2, no match, and up to policy n. If no match at all, that request for authentication will be rejected. Okay. Now, Microsoft, they work a little bit differently, but that's a basic principle. If any match, let us say the request comes and there's a match in policy 1, then all actions that are configured in policy 1 will be implemented. Example, let us say the user has authenticated, all good and nice. Policy 1 has met all the conditions of that request, wireless, wired, whatever. And then I must say actions will say VLAN, that user should be VLAN employee, right? And then that user should have a policy where firewall say, okay, allow everything, everywhere, anything, allow all. Okay, so if the policy match, then the actions will be taken and so on. Policy no match, then there will be rejection if there's no policy match. Okay, the other thing is the order of the policies is very, very important. ClearPass or any radius, it doesn't have that sophistication to say, okay, I'm going to sift through this and I see what is the best policy matches without going through the policies. It doesn't work this way. Think of policies in ClearPass equals to ACLs, access control lists, as we know them. In access control list world, we go through one by one, the switch or the controller or whatever device, go access list 1, the conditions, no match, next. Access list 2, no match, the conditions missed, till they find a match. Okay? If no match, there will be implicit deny at the end, like in Cisco, like in Aruba, like in Juniper, or you can have a policy say, okay, I intend, if there is no match, to allow the user to, walk in, no problem. Okay? And you will have explicit allow all. Exactly the same here. Exactly the same here. Though these are not ACLs, these are radius policies that will implement a more sophisticated actions and so on. Right. So that's basic principle of any radius communication. So let's see how ClearPass can help us in this aspect and how does it work. Yeah. If you have any question here, let me know, please. But if you understand